Imagine living during a time period in which landing on the moon has just become a reality. Neil Armstrong and space rockets seem to be the only things that people can talk about on the radio. The idea of being launched into space is a new idea and concept that is terrifying yet mesmerizing. It is the year 1970, and you are one of the astronauts about to begin the third lunar mission, Apollo 13, and manifest a childhood dream into reality. A couple of days into the journey, however, as you are looking out of the space shuttle window and see the moon gradually getting closer and closer, you feel the spacecraft shudder violently and hear the frantic alarms notifying the crew that something has gone terribly wrong. Apollo 13 is my favorite movie in science, as it not only shows the tremendous technological and scientific advances that took place during this time period, but also shows us the scientific thought processes that go behind when something goes wrong. This movie is about three different astronauts, Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Haise, in their participation in the third lunar mission. The space rocket took off on April 11, 1970, and initially the mission progressed pretty smoothly. However, 2 days later, during a routine stirring of the oxygen tanks, there was an explosion due to overheating of the wires and damage as a result, leading to dangerous levels of carbon dioxide accumulating in the spacecraft and threatening the lives of the astronauts. Since the oxygen tanks also helped the fuel cells function, there was concern that not only would there not be enough energy to land on the moon, but possibly there wouldn't be enough energy to return home. Scientists from Mission Control had to scramble to find a solution that would bring home the astronauts safely. From this, there are clearly direct implications of science. In addition to certain aspects such as NASA and traveling to the moon, there is mention of accumulating carbon dioxide levels due to damaged oxygen tanks and continued respiration of the astronauts. Additionally, Mission Control mentions the need to use the moon's gravity to essentially bring the astronauts back home from it being pushed. However, I also notice that there are indirect implications of science that may not be very noticeable, but are definitely applied. For example, according to the journal article titled Teaching Chemistry Using the Movie Apollo 13 from the Journal of Chemical Education, an organic chemistry reaction was implied regarding the buildup of carbon dioxide. More specifically, because of this buildup, Mission Control had decided to use a lithium hydroxide filter in which carbon dioxide would essentially be converted to lithium carbonate. Along with this chemical reaction, orbital mechanics and basic physics concepts such as inertia were implied during the takeoff scene of Apollo 13. The article Teaching Science Using the Movie Apollo 13 from Science Scope also talks about the hypothesis observation cycle and how it was used in the movie. From this, I gathered that the hypothesis observation cycle is essentially the creation of multiple hypotheses that are testable from a list of observations. This cycle had to be completed numerous times during the movie, as scientists from Mission Control truly had no idea what had caused the explosion of the oxygen tanks and really how to fix it. They had to look at data and various readings from instruments to determine that the astronauts were running out of breathable air and the spacecraft did not have enough energy to return home to Earth. From these observations, Mission Control had to create testable hypotheses that were viable and were realistic so that the lives of the astronauts would be saved. Ultimately, as previously mentioned, they decided that they would use the moon's gravity to propel the astronauts around like a slingshot so that they would be able to return back to Earth. And they also decided to use the lithium hydroxide filters using supplies only that the astronauts had available to them in the space rocket. Although Apollo 13 undoubtedly keeps viewers on the edges of their seats, it also includes very valuable scientific principles. Rockets, space, scientists, the moon, and gravity are all important aspects to this movie. However, even though Apollo 13 was a tremendous technological and scientific advance for its time, it was the creation of multiple hypotheses from a list of observations that ultimately saved the lives of these astronauts.